Do you have a method that you use to help you make decisions when you're faced with challenges in life? Sometimes that's called a rule of life, and it can be a really useful tool when dealing with just about any situation that we have that pops up in our lives. So, do you have a rule of life that you live by? Well, if not, perhaps I have a couple that might be beneficial for you. So stay tuned, and I'll share those with you right here on the One Theophilus podcast. Well, welcome to the One Theophilus podcast, a weekly devotional to encourage you and to lift you up, and it's all centered around trying to serve God and to get closer to Him through His Word, the Bible. It's where we learn what it means to be loved by Him and to love Him just as the name Theophilus implies. I'm your host, Troy Spradlin, and I'm just one Theophilus among many like you out there who are trying every day just to do better in their Christian walk. And so today I want to try to help you with your spiritual journey by sharing with you a couple of useful principles to help you in making decisions and dealing with challenges that often pop up in our lives. And they're called a rule of life. So, what is a rule of life? Well, it's simply a phrase or a saying or some kind of reminder, maybe in the form of a memory device, that's based upon biblical principles in order to help you and guide you when making decisions or facing certain challenges in your life. And the purpose of a rule of life is to create regular godly habits that will foster a more holy and happy relationship with God and your neighbor. Just like we read about in Mark chapter 12, which teaches we are to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves. It may be something like what your grandparents or maybe one of your parents used to say while growing up. Sometimes they'll say things like, never go to bed angry, or always say your prayers before going to bed, and those sort of sayings. And so those are the type of things that can become a rule of life. Now, a really good maxim or rule of life is this one that I learned from a preacher that I used to listen to in my youth. And he even said he got it from someone else. And it goes like this: it is always right to do right. It is always wrong to do wrong. It is never right to do wrong, and it is never wrong to do right. Did you catch that? Well, let me repeat it one more time. It is always right to do right. It is always wrong to do wrong. It is never right to do wrong, and it is never wrong to do right. That is such a strong truth, and it can help just about anybody navigate some of life's toughest moments. And that's because it's based upon biblical principles. And I promise it will never fail you when making a difficult decision or dealing with something in your life. I've used it many times in my own life, and it's just one of those precepts that is always proven to be reliable and true. Now, there's another useful rule of life that I use alongside that one that really helps me a lot, and it's based off of Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, that says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And so the rule of life that is very useful for me is a simple question, and that is, where is Jesus in this? No matter the situation, no matter how difficult of a decision you may be facing or how troublesome some scenario may turn out, if you will simply ask the question, where is Jesus in this? It will guide you in the right direction. And that's because looking at a situation or a challenge in the context of how Jesus handled it will provide the necessary example and light to help guide you down the right path. Several years ago, there was a popular acronym that was seen on lots of bumper stickers and billboards and T-shirts and all kinds of things, and people would say the letters WWJD. Just that, WWJD with a question mark. Now, some of you might remember that those letters stood for, what would Jesus do? And the idea was if you get yourself into a jam or some big problem or something, then you just simply ask yourself those words or say that phrase, WWJD. In other words, what would Jesus do in that situation? Sounds good at first, but just stop and think about that for a minute. While the intention of that catchphrase was certainly good, it still misses the mark of being truly useful. Now, why is that? Well, it's because the word would leaves far too much room for speculation or personal interpretation of something of what Jesus might do. You see, approaching a problem in that manner can be extremely dangerous because our thoughts and our imaginations and our intentions may not always align with what Jesus actually did. You see, it allows for someone to say, well, I think Jesus would do this in that situation, or he would do that if he were faced with the same problem, when in reality, he might not. In fact, in most cases, Jesus never did what the people thought he would do. Remember, people in his time thought he would free them from the Roman rule because they believed the Messiah would be an earthly military leader. Look in passages like Matthew 22:42 and Acts 1 verse 6 that shows how they misunderstood. But in reality, what he actually did do was establish a spiritual kingdom, according to passages like Matthew 16:18 and 19 and John 18 verse 36. Therefore, wouldn't it be better to simply imitate what Christ actually did instead of speculating what he would, or that is, might do? I've often said that perhaps a better acronym would have been WDJD instead of WWJD. So what did Jesus do? If we simply study his actions and replicate them to the best of our ability, well, you certainly can't go wrong with that. So here's where the rule of life comes into play. Looking for Jesus in every situation that you face, whether it's good or bad, will greatly bless your life. There is almost no scenario to which this truth cannot be applied. For example, before you're about to confront someone or engage in a difficult conversation, which nobody really likes to do, well, just ask yourself, okay, where's Jesus in this? And if you do that, it will help you have the right attitude before going into that discussion. Or if you become angry with someone, just look for Jesus in that situation, and it will help you deal with the other person or the problem in a more proper Christian-like manner. Perhaps maybe you know a couple of brethren who are at odds with each other. Ask them, therefore, to ask the question, where is Jesus in this? Because it could provide just the right remedy that is so desperately needed to resolve their conflict. You see, there's no doubt that there are going to be moments when we are going to have to make difficult decisions. Sometimes we have to decide something in a rush, or we often have to do something in a situation that is not ideal, and that turns into results in making a poor decision so many times. That's why asking the question, where is Jesus in this? When you ask that question in that moment, it will always guide you in making the best decision. And that's because if we're honest with ourselves and genuinely look upon his example, well, we should always be able to find a good solution. But in order for this to work, as it should, you first have to learn about Jesus. So I hope this will encourage you to open up your Bible and get to know the Son of God. Observe his actions. Take note of his mannerisms and memorize his responses to various situations. Let that be your guide. You see, the more you know about him, the easier it is to lean upon him, which will always help you do what is right. So there you have it. 2 rules of life that are very useful. They can help you have a stronger relationship with God and your neighbor. So just to remember, the first one is it's always right to do right. It's always wrong to do wrong. It's never wrong to do right, and it's never right to do wrong. And the second one is simply asking the question, where is Jesus in this? Thank you so much for listening and joining me here on the One Theophilus podcast. I really hope that this has encouraged you today and will help you with your spiritual walk. And if it has, would you please help us get the word out by sharing this podcast with others so perhaps it will help them too. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So until next time, keep striving to be a Theophilus by keeping your eyes on Jesus. God bless.